Hello everybody. Today I'm going to do a quick demo of the Creator Kit for a custom page that you can add to your model-driven apps that shows all the documents that are in SharePoint. Okay? So it's a specific use case, but it'll give you used to how the Creator Kit kind of works. All right? I want to start with saying you have a lot in the package. You've got apps and templates, you've got code components, and you've got design guidelines. And you use all these things in order to do more with less time spent on building it. Those of you that create Power Apps code framework components know that these are great things for adding a way for makers to get started, right? If you have a special brand and you want to create those components, developers can easily create code components that can be used in any app. They are going to be in a solution, and so you would install the solution in the environment where you want to use the code, and then you can leverage these components. You may not have started building your own PCF components, and that's okay, because that's why you have the Creator Kit. It has a whole bunch that you can leverage out of the box, all right? We're going to look at some of this stuff, so don't worry. There are some prerequisites, all right? Prerequisite number 1. This is all about the Power Apps component framework, because everything we're offering in this kit is based on the component framework. Therefore, the first thing you need to do, and I'll stress that again, first thing you need to do before you go download the Creator Kit, before you install the Creator Kit, is to go to the environments where you plan to use these components and enable the feature for Power Apps component framework for Canvas apps. All right. You do that simply by going to the Power Apps Admin Center, selecting the environment that you want to add it to, click on Product, and then Features, and turn this on. Please remember to do that first, otherwise you may have to uninstall and reinstall to get them to work. Okay? I put them first in the deck for a reason. And by the way, you don't have to take notes because I'm going to give you this deck. There'll be a link to this deck in the community in the description below. All right. Next thing you need to do is go to aka.ms Creator Kit and download the Creator Kit. You'll also need to download the app for the reference, and I'll show you that in a second. You'll download both of those and installing the 2 solutions, and I suggest you install them one at a time. So import the Creator Kit and then import the Canvas reference app, which is called Creator Kit References. This one will be the app that has all of the goodness in it that you can review and kind of decide what you want to use. So just again, you'll go to just aka.ms Creator Kit and you'll download, at a minimum, you'll download the Creator Kit solution and you'll download the Creator Kit reference. And basically, these are what I'm focusing on today. But if you look at the docs, there's even more over there that you may choose to download as well. Let's give it a try together, assuming that I've already turned on the PCF controls and I'm already installed the solution. Again, don't worry about taking notes because I've put all of the notes in this deck for you. And you'll see me use it while we give this a go. All right. So I want to show you what it looks like first. So I'll just open up an app I had already created. This is a model-driven app, and it has this custom page in it with the list of documents, the spec code, and the icon. Okay. And so basically, this is the PCF component that is connected to SharePoint. The data set it's connected to is to SharePoint, and it's showing the specification documents. 3 features we're going to have today. 1 is the details list itself that shows the title and the spec code. 2 is the link So double clicking on these document names will open up the specification on SharePoint. And then there's an icon here that represents the file type. So all of that I'm going to show you. You'll also notice that these columns, you can make them wider and smaller. Like, look, somebody had an amazingly long title for that particular image. So you just size it. All right. So let's learn how I put this together. Again, we got 3 features: the actual list, then the link to the file, and then the icons. So let's do it in that order. I'm going to open up a different app. So let's just go, and I'm going to open up an app that doesn't have any custom pages in it in edit mode. So basically, you can do this in any model-driven app. This is my Northwind Traders app, and so it has all the Northwind Trader data. I use it for demos a lot. But now I'm going to add the page. So basically, let's pretend that everybody that's using this database needs documents that are on SharePoint. Now, in the case of like third-party vendors, external users are already using SharePoint to find these docs. And all I'm doing is making this easy for our internal staff to find them as well without having to leave the app. All right. So I'm going to add a page, and I'm going to add a custom page. And this is going to put me right back in Canvas app land, right? And I'm just going to call this Spec Docs. This will be the name of my page, okay? And I'm just going to add that. And I can put spaces. I took it out just because, I don't know, I'm kind of weird. You can put as many spaces. You can make it a longer name. It's up to you. But that will be the name of the page, technically, okay? All right, so now it's loading, and now I'm back in Canvas land. Now, what you'll notice is I have 2 tabs now. I have the model-driven app, and I have the custom page. So these 2 tabs together represent my app. Then I have the Creator Reference Kit opened. So when you install this, you will get this app that will be part of your Power Apps environment. It's that there are solutions, and one of them is the Creator Kit, and one of them is the Creator Kit reference. So these are the 2 that I installed following the instructions in the deck I'm going to give you. That will lead you to the apps, and there you'll see a Creator Kit app. This is where you can view all of these great components and see how they work. But then it also has a Fluent Team Designer app, and there may be others. So check GitHub for different apps that you can upload and install in your environment. Once you install them, you can just browse them first, right? So I'm kind of jumping ahead. I'm assuming that you've already browsed this, or in my case, I have already browsed this, and I've decided of all the things in this app, the one thing that I want to use is the detailed list. So when you open the app, I'll let you take the time to look through these yourself because it's all fully documented. And just note that all of the components that you see in the navigation, you're always going to get a description of what they are, some best practices like, okay, what's good things to do? And when we talk about do's and don'ts, these are Fluent UI best practices that make your apps more coherent and easier to use. So pay attention to any guidelines that you get like that for all of these components. But the one I'm focused on today is this document list here. And I'm going to take it from a very simple approach. And so basically, because I want this, I can go and look at it here and see what it's going to look like. And then when I want the code, I just click here, and all the code for this is here. All I've done for you today is break this code down into separate components so that you can see, understand it a little bit easier, especially those of you that are new makers and may not be familiar with Power Apps expressions. All right. So all the code that I have, I got from here, and I just revised it based on my requirements. And you'll see that as I go through the steps. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is just rename my screen home, home docs. You name it something that if accessibility reader was to say it out loud, people would know what it was talking about. So I do give friendly human names to my screens because of accessibility readers. Now I'm going to add the containers. So model-driven apps by default, they're responsive. When it comes to Canvas and custom pages, we have to ensure that responsiveness. So I'm going to add a vertical container that represents my whole screen. And I'm just going to slam it up in the corner here just by dragging and dropping as far left top as I can. And what that will do is make the X and Y property 0. Okay, and you can go and check and make sure your dragging and dropping worked well. And then the other thing I'm going to do is go over here and set the width property. So I'm going to set the width to parent width and the height to parent height. Really easy. And so this represents my whole screen, so to speak. Now I'm going to add in there, in this, a horizontal container again. And if you look here, you can see that one container is inside the other. So this was the first one that I added. So let's just call this main container. And then I stayed with that selected. So anything I add after that goes within that. And I'm just going to call this header container because this is where I'm going to put the header. And basically the header has the width of its parent, right? So I can just align with container stretch. And then the height, I want it to be about 1 inch. So I'm not going to make that flexible. I'm going to make it 72 pixels, which equals 1 inch. And then I'm going to give that a background color of something dark, because that's what I like. And then I will insert a label. Notice how it's going into that container, because that's where I was. That will say specification documents. So this was I guess I would say this is the easy part. I am just setting up the header, right? And I'll give this white text, and I'll make it 24 points, and I'll make that the height is set by the container, so it's stretched, and the width will just make it parent width. Okay. Now I have my header in there. Now I'm going to go back to my main container and add another this is the last one, container. And this is going to be a vertical container. And it automatically will fit the bottom of the screen. And that's where my document list is going to be. Now, normally, most people who have document libraries, they have more than just 2 columns. So I'm just keeping it just on 2 columns today for the sake of time. But you'll add as many columns as you need. So here's the important part. How do we get the component in here? Right? You're wondering. Well, we're going to click the plus sign like we do for everything else. And we'll notice there's no components in here. Right? So there's a little down here on the bottom. It says get more components. You click on that. It is looking at this environment's solutions. Right? So again, reminding you to make sure you turn on PCF controllers and you install the Creator Kit in the environment where you plan to use it. That way it will show up when people click on Get More Components. Now I'm going to go get the code component for the Fluent Details list and click Import. Basically what I'm doing is importing the component into the controls of my app so that it can be added to the screen. So now I'm going to just click on it to add it to the screen. Now, when I add it, let's see if I can zoom in and let you see this a little better. When I add it, it looks empty, right? The only thing it wants to know is what's the data that you want to add to this, right? So here's where I'm going to add SharePoint. So I'm just going to look for SharePoint. I don't want the Dataverse SharePoint. I want the SharePoint connection. And I already have one. If you didn't have one, you could also add the connection. And I'm going to use that site where the specification files are and click connect. So over here in SharePoint, I have a library called specification files. That library has all the files I want to show on this page. Again, I'm only using 2 columns, title and code, but I can use as many columns as exist in the list. Okay, so I'm going to go back here, and what you're going to notice like right away is that this is not a gallery. So when you add a gallery and you connect data, you automatically see columns, right? But don't think of PCF controls as galleries because they are not the same animal, okay? Which means that there's a few things we need to do to make sure this component has what it needs to show us the right columns, all right? So I'm going to start by first thing I want to do is make sure that I have the right fields, right? So, and I'm doing this in the order I'm suggesting you do it in so you don't run into any problems, all right? So the title and the code is here. So I don't need this, so I can take it away. But I do need, I think that was all I needed. Oh, no, I need the link to the item. I'm going to use that later, and you'll see that's how we're going to get that double click. So I want to make sure it's included in my PCF control. I still don't see any columns here yet, right? You're probably wondering, well, Audrey, where are the columns, right? They're coming. Give me a second. So all I'm doing first is getting the control onto the page, making sure it's associated to the right data set, and then checking that the right columns that I plan to use on the page are all added. Okay, so consider those steps important. And the other things are just normal, right? So you can set the width to be the width of the container. You can set the height to flexible. You can do all those things. Those are all just normal everyday things that you would want to do. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about them because they're normal everyday things that you'd want to do. So with this selected though, now we're going to set up our columns. So you'll notice that this PCF control has a columns items property, something that you do not see in a gallery, right? Because galleries already pick up their columns. But in this control, I'm going to see columns items. And this is one of the reasons why it's really important to look at the Creator Kit guidance and the code, because it helps you understand the dependencies of the control, which may be different than what you're used to doing in Power Apps, okay? But gives you much more flexibility on how these things will look and how smooth they are for people to understand, all right? So in this column items area here, I'm actually going to specify what columns I want. So in the deck that I'm going to give you, you would just go to the column, that's the slide that's called Quick and Dirty Document Library, and you can copy this code. What you might want to do is paste it into OneNote and then copy it again. That would prevent PowerPoint or wherever you might be storing your code from copying over formats, right? Because you want this to be a clean copy over. All right, and I'm just going to paste that into the column items property of the Fluent Details list control that we just added. Okay. Okay, let me explain this to you. There is one set of code for each column. Okay, and here's what's important about this. The column name and the column display name are important. The column name is the data source internal name for that column. So I'm using SharePoint today, but you could be connecting to anything. It doesn't matter. If it's tabular data, right, you've got to give it the internal name of the column. So in SharePoint, FYI, for those of you may be new to SharePoint, if I wanted to know what the internal name of code is, right, because people can type whatever they want. Doesn't mean it's the internal name. I would open the column, and then up here at the top it says field equal. And what's after the equal sign is the internal name of the column. So for the most part, you're safe using internal names and not trusting the display name to be correct. Okay, because it may have been changed after the fact. So in my case, the internal name is title. Now this display name here is for this page. What do I want it to say, right? So I could say file title. So it don't care what this one is not thinking about SharePoint. This is thinking about what do you want it to say here when you display this, okay? So you put whatever you want. Then you can put a width. If you want it bold, you have col is bold. And column resizable enables me to do that dragging to open or close, which I totally recommend, especially for people who are zooming in and zooming out. Let them resize their columns, but give them a default width, just so that 9 times out of 10, most of the data will show. And then the other column I wanted to show was the code column, which I showed you the internal name is code. And then here I want it to be called spec code. So this is for this page, all right? And both are resizable true, and both column width is 200. If I wanted to show more columns from my SharePoint list, yep, you guessed it, I'd have to add another block. So basically you'd copy one of these blocks, make sure there's always a column between them, and you'd paste, and then you could put the other column name here, okay? So you do that until you have all the columns in your column items for your table. And you'll notice, if I just play this, that it's working, right? We see the title of the file. We see the spec code. These are directly from SharePoint. So if I go back to, well, I don't have SharePoint open here, but they are directly from SharePoint. So it's very easy for me to validate. Notice that these two files, the title field actually has the extension. So if I wanted that to change, I would just change it on SharePoint, and then it would show up here without that. All right. So now I want to add a link to those files so that if somebody double clicked on this, they could open the file on SharePoint. So in order to do that, I need to change an advanced property. So I'm going to zoom out just so I can find it. Open up my controls here on the right. And we'll look at the advanced properties. And in the deck, again, we're going to the next page, which is how to add active links to documents. We're going to do two things. We're going to make sure the column cell type link property is on the column where we want them to click. So I added that to the title column. So I'm just going to copy this text. Again, if you just copy it from here, you might want to put it in OneNote first just to make sure it doesn't get any formatting from PowerPoint. And then you'll go back into the column items and you'll just add that, so that now the column is understood as link formatted. Okay. It doesn't have a link yet, but it's link formatted. And so you can see the underscores under each title. All right. Now, but nothing's going to happen when we click on those because it's just link formatted. All right. So how do we get the link to work so that it actually opens up the file? All right, we go back to our PowerPoint deck, and we're going to copy this little bit of code here, and we're going to make an on-change event for this control. So I'm going to copy this little piece of code, and basically it makes sense for self, this item. The event name is a cell action. So this means when you click on this, what will it do? It will launch self-selected, whichever one is selected, the link to item. All right, so let's go put that in the on-change properties of our control. So I've got the fluid details list control. I've got the advanced, and now I can go into on change and paste that in there. Again, you can do this dynamically. You don't have to copy and paste, but just remember self selected and then the name of the column that will be used for the link, right? Which is link to item. Okay? Remember that we had to make sure we exposed that column beforehand. All right? So, and I went over that with you earlier. That column has to be available in the data set. So basically of this Fluent control, we edit fields, we got to make sure this is there, right? We don't want it to show on this page, but we want it to be used for the link, and so we have to expose it here. All right, so now we can save. When we play this, and I click on one of these, it'll open up the actual document. Okay? Wonderful. We're almost there. Now, let's kick it up just one more notch before we end this video. Let's add those icons. All right? Now, that requires a few things, and that's the last slide here. The first thing it requires is the icons themselves. And so they are also in the code in the reference, but I actually did a little bit of revising to add a couple of more file types. So when you copy this code over, so you're in the Creator Reference Kit, and you'll see this code at the very top here. You might want to double check it and make sure that it has the file types that you want and that both sides match. Now, what I have done in the deck is giving you a link to where you can get all the icons you ever dreamed of that Microsoft promotes, and then you can get those URLs, because for each file type, you need a link to the URL of the image so that it can show it. All right. So again, I'm going to go ahead and make this collection, and you notice here I put it in the on start. Again, I'm going to put it in OneNote and then copy it from there. And I just find it avoids me having formatting issues in Power Apps when I take it into OneNote. And so right here, I'm going to go into my on start. And this is where I'm going to make a collection that's going to have all of my, and you can see here's an example of a formatting issue. The quote was curly. Can't have curly quotes, right? So that's why I say use OneNote whenever you can to make sure that the stuff formatting from Office doesn't get carried over. But you shouldn't have to worry about that if you're copying directly from the code in the reference app. All right. So now I have a PDF, I have an image, and I actually use the same icon for every kind of photo. And then I have PowerPoint. And so you can see on the left is the extension, and on the right is the SVG that is used for that extension. So you're just mapping a collection with the name and the URL. All right, here comes something fun. So we need to update our items property in this case, because we're going to have to add a column. See this? Update the items property so that that new column for icons is there. Because we don't have a column for that in SharePoint, do we? We don't really have it. It shows in SharePoint, but we don't have access to that column. So we're going to have to add it. So I'm going to highlight the Fluent, and I'm going to select items. And I'm just going to edit this with what's in the deck. All right. And basically all I'm doing is wrapping around the data source, which again could be anything, and add columns formula that's going to add a column called icon image. That's what I decided to call it. You can call it whatever you'd like. You might want to call it pick or something else. And then what is that column basically going to return? What URL? It's going to basically look up the collection that we have in the on start, the column row images, and it's going to look for where the name equals and it's going to split our file name with extension, because that's the field in SharePoint that contains the .docx, etc. It's going to split that at the dot and give us the URL, give us the result of that split. And then we're going to take the URL and use that as our column value. So the column is going to be named icon image. The value for each record is actually going to be the split of the file name with extension. We're going to take that second part, which is what comes after the dot, to know what file type this is. All right. I hope that wasn't too complicated to understand. I think if you give it a try, it'll make sense to you. All right. So now we basically have a new column there, right? But we don't have the column on the page yet. So we're going to do a little bit of an edit to our column items, the one we did earlier. And of course, you could do this first now that you've gone through this training, right? But I did it like little by little just so you can kind of learn along the way. And basically what we're going to do here is we're going to look at our column items, and you can get to them if you just by clicking column items and the properties. If you click the FX, it'll take you into the formula. And then basically I'm going to put a column in the front here for the icon. All right. It carries the same story as everything else, but it is a column that we created actually by using the add columns formula. And then in the display today, I just might call it pick. And this is basically, what is it going to be called on the screen, right? Everything else is the same. Important thing to note here is that for this column, because it's an image, its call cell type is image. Whereas the other one we did, the call cell type was link, right? So these call cell types are going to be pretty handy to keep in mind when it comes to Fluent UI. All right. So now that we've adjusted that, just make sure everything is here. I'm going to rerun my on start because I changed it. Let's just see if what else am I forgetting. So let's check our notes here. I forgot one thing. I need to add that icon image. Remember I said you have to have it showing. So it wasn't, I couldn't add it earlier because we didn't create it till just now. So I'm going to go ahead, and you'll notice that icon image column that I added with the add control, it's here. So I have to remember to add it because you won't have access to that in your page unless it's part of the data that's available in the data set, right? So instantly it all pops up, right? Isn't this awesome? And so me talking might have taken this 15 minutes, right? But you doing this really shouldn't take more than 2 minutes, especially if you use the deck that I'm sharing with you so that you can reproduce it in the same way I did. So important thing to remember on this is to always save when you finish. And it's a good idea to click the publish button and publish this version. When you leave this, you will be able to go back to your app, and your app should remind you that you need to republish. This is really not an error, it's just a reminder. So you need to hit publish from the model-driven app to make sure it's picked up your changes that you did on your custom page. And so we'll just give this a minute to, you see over here it's publishing. The little circle of hope is spinning. I'm going to hit play to kind of test it out. And here's my orders. I don't know what I was practicing here, but let's go skip straight to spec dots. And this is the custom page that we just created together using the Creator Toolkit code component for Fluent Details lists. Try a couple of them and see how they work. It's this slowness that you're seeing here is not typical, so excuse that. But there is our custom page, and it should work fine. It's responsive and all of that. because of those containers. And it's kind of cool to be able to open your model-driven world up to any data you have through custom pages, but then also make it look pretty cool with the Creator Kit. So I wish you the best with this kit. Here's what I'm asking to you, right? I'm giving you the deck. I'd like you to add comments below this video if there's something else in the Creator Kit that you really need me to demo, that you tried it on your own, but it didn't seem to work out as the way you expected. Just leave a little comment below. Hey, Audrey, could you demo X, right? And in that case, what you want to think about when you think about X is you need to give me the name of the left navigation from the Creator Kit reference app. Then I'll know what you're talking about, right? So just tell me, hey, Audrey, I tried Tags Picker, didn't work out the way I thought. Would you do a video? And I will try and prioritize these based on your feedback. So if you see someone ask for something that you also want, like their comment, because now that's going to prioritize it because it has more than one person asking for it. So do that and I will support you because this is the most awesome thing I have seen in a long time. And it will enable you to have really great looking apps that people know how to use because these are standards and practices that we're just leveraging in our custom apps. So enjoy, and I'll be talking to you soon.